Hi everybody, welcome to this new video of the GenAI Nerd channel. And in this video, I want to give you a brief introduction to the new ChatGPT desktop application. And so in this video, I will explain what this application is actually about and how it's actually different from using ChatGPT in your web browser. Of course, I will also show you how you can download this application and start using it. I will actually also highlight some essential settings that you have to change to make sure that you can use it in a productive but also in a safe way. And finally, I will kind of illustrate briefly some essential features that you can use in the ChatGPT desktop application. So let's get started. So let me briefly explain the distinction between the ChatGPT web browser that most of you have used already a lot and the new ChatGPT desktop application, which was actually called before the Codex application. But recently ChatGPT rebranded this application. And you have to see it like that. So if you use the normal ChatGPT in the web browser, you actually go to ChatGPT and you bring files to ChatGPT by, for instance, uploading files into the web browser. However, when we use the ChatGPT desktop application, we go the other way around. We actually bring ChatGPT to our computer where ChatGPT will be able to access specific files or folders on our computer. So that's the core distinction. With the web browser, we go to ChatGPT and bring our files to the web browser. With the application, we bring ChatGPT to our computer. So let me briefly show you how you can actually download the ChatGPT desktop application. So in your browser, you simply have to go to chatgpt.com/download. And then you will see that you immediately have the option to download the desktop application for a Mac or Windows. And it's like normal software installation. So then you need to do the traditional installation steps. And then you will be able to start using the application on your computer. The first time that you enter the application, you will always have to log in with your ChatGPT account that you already have, and then you can start using the application. So then if you open the application, it should look like this. And before explaining what this application is about, I think it's important to first highlight some essential settings of this application. And how can we go to settings? We just go to the account, and then you can click here on settings. And then first of all, you see the general settings. And this is about kind of the permissions that ChatGPT receives. And this is important because, as I mentioned, you now bring ChatGPT to your computer. So you want to be a bit conservative in terms of permissions. So what I definitely do not encourage you to do is to give ChatGPT full access to your computer, because this could really trigger some security risks. So you can give it default permissions. And if you want, you can also allow it to auto-review, but I would definitely not enable the full access. On top of that, it makes sense to go to configuration and change sandbox settings from read-only. So normally by default, it's mentioned read-only to workspace write. Because if you only have read-only, ChatGPT desktop will actually struggle to help you with editing files, creating files. And that's actually the advantage of this tool. Whereas if you have the workspace write, it can actually do that. Again, also here, I would not encourage you to use the full access because, again, we want not to create security risks here. So these are kind of the settings that you need to adjust before starting working with this application. So let me now show you a bit what you can do with this application. First of all, you can see here that you can choose for ChatGPT and Codex. And Codex you can see as Cloud Code. So in Cloud, you have Cloud Code. Codex is a bit the Cloud Code of ChatGPT. So this is mainly relevant for developers that really use it for coding. And today I will not spend too much time on that. You can always explore if you want. But today I will focus on the ChatGPT part, where you have kind of two options. You have the chat option and the work option. Now the chat option is actually very similar to what you would do in the web browser in the chat. So here using the desktop application doesn't have a lot of advantages. However, in the work version, it becomes different because in the work version, we can now really start working in folders on our computer, give ChatGPT access to folders, and then it can optimize, fine-tune, revise existing files, create new files. And that's kind of the big advantage of using this desktop application. Now, how can you give it access to particular folders? You simply have to click here on Choose Project, and then we can kind of create a new project. And we can give it here a description, so we can now do something like GenAI test. And then if I click here on this sign, I can actually kind of connect a folder of my computer to this project. So if I click on this, I can now simply choose a folder of my computer. And the moment I do this, then ChatGPT has access to this particular folder. So then it can start reading files in that folder, editing files in that folder, even deleting files in that folder. So that's why it's important to give it access to specific folders. So that's how we can start working with files on our computer in the ChatGPT desktop application. Another important feature is the plugins. So here, actually, we can use specific plugins. For instance, we have plugins to easily work with Word, PowerPoint, Excel in the ChatGPT desktop application, but there are also more specific plugins. For instance, this is a plugin to start creating templates for PowerPoint slides. So here you have all kinds of plugins that you can try out. Of course, there are also the plugins to connect with your email, with your SharePoint, with your calendar. So this is what you can do here. And on top of that, you can also build skills in the ChatGPT desktop application. If you have never heard about skills, I have separate videos on why they are relevant, what kind of skills you can build. But here you can easily create and use your skills. So in that way, there are some very nice features in this ChatGPT desktop application that you can then combine with files on your folder. Finally, one important final comment. When you use ChatGPT, you can choose which model you use. And now here I have enabled 5.6 Sol Extra High. That's the most sophisticated model, but also the most token intensive model. So if you use this model, your usage will go down very quickly. You can actually check your usage here by going to settings and then to usage and billing. Then you will see how many tokens you have used. Today, I have not yet used it a lot, so I have for the next 5 hours still 100% left. But actually, if you use these advanced models, this token use can go down very quickly. So what I actually recommend is that you do not use as a kind of default the most advanced models, but a more medium model. So I would kind of as a default rather use 5.5 with medium thinking or medium effort. And this will be good enough for like 95% of my use cases. And if I then need really a very performant model, I can always go to the Sol 5.6 when it's really necessary. Okay, that was kind of the basic information I wanted to show you on how you can start using ChatGPT desktop application, what you need to take into account. I hope this is helpful to start experimenting with this particular application because I think it can be very valuable. So I hope this was helpful for you and thanks for your attention. Bye.